All right. Well, I think we've got a slide here that shows my farm. I'm a third generation farmer. My grandfather started here in about 1913, 14 when he came through the Pacific Northwest, headed to the Louisiana area looking for work, and he found it right here instead. We'll get our slide projections. When he came into this area, he found this valley to be not the way it is today. The Gunnison Company had just come online, and he found that a lot of the work was associated in the drainage business, because I think what happened is when the Cowboy River was charged with water, and then they distributed these through a lot of these new built canals and laterals. They found that there was a lot of seepage losses, and then all of a sudden there was water coming out in places that they'd never seen water before. And so he entered into a business called the Meaker Drainage Company, and they were in charge of building a lot of the drainages that you see here in the area. And in the process, he met the young lady on the farm that where he mentioned Meaker, and that's where we got started out on what is called, or at least the old timers called, the Cowboy Mesa. So we are sitting just north of the Delta Montrose Electric Field office. At the end of the road there, we farm about 300 acres out of about a 400-acre block of ground. And this is kind of a picture of my farm. This picture, generated by the NRCS office, was 2010. And it's a pretty good representation of where we are today. You can see here the three pivots. You fly over the area, my farm is very easy to recognize. So the first pivot on the very bottom of the page here was put in the year 2003. That was the first. The second pivot was the full circle pivot. That's about 90 acres. That was put in 2006. Both of those were funded underneath basin funds as a demonstration site for Montrose County, Montrose and Delta counties. Okay? And then the third pivot we applied for and received some cost sharing in about 2007. So we farmed with those three. They cover about 150 acres out of 300 acres of farm ground that we run. Everything else is furrow irrigated, conventional. Okay? Conventional from the standpoint of it's all on 30-inch centers, flood irrigation. But unconventional from the standpoint that over the years I've tried to develop into more of a minimum till type practice, and it's very well. It's much easier to do it in a pivot, but it can be done in conventional furrows. Okay? So you'll notice, and this is supposed to talk a little bit about the agriculture side of things, but this area right here, right in the center of all of this, just happens to be my feedlot. I've got about a 1,500 head capacity feedlot, of which years and years ago, prior to developing the feedlot, we were in the sheep business. And we ran about 3,000 head of sheep between Utah and the high country, and then this was the landing operation for that. That ended in about 1968, and my granddad and my father went into commercial cow-calf operation. We ran about 350 cow-calves. And that's when the feedlot began to be built. We built it in that spot because it was this high rise of a knoll that couldn't be farmed. And so what better place to put a feedlot other than up there, which gives us some very natural drainages and slopes and that sort of thing. Today, we sold out of the cow-calf business in 1983, and we have pursued this idea of a small custom feedlot, of which I particularly like to deal with replacement development for some of the outlying ranches. Okay, so let's roll the picture. My farm did not always look like it does today. In fact, this picture is the earliest picture that we have that showed, this is 1959. And if you remember, I said that my grandfather got oriented on the farm about 1913, 14, 15. It's a very interesting thing on this map right here, because all of these little lines right here, these are all tile lines, okay? Underground tile line, the yellow lines here are all open drainages, which my grandfather was part of the process of putting that in. But down here in this corner right here, you can't read it, but it says tile lines, 24,800 feet of tile lines, underground tile lines, to help drain all this property so that they could farm it, okay? Well, that's almost 5 miles of underground tile lines, not inclusive of the large ones, okay? Like I say, in the very, very early days, they went into the sheep business. And so, particularly back in those days, and when I was a real young boy, all I remember is that they tried very, very hard to raise some sort of feed to feed the sheep when they were there on the farm. Okay, Jerry? Okay, so this, I came online, I went off to school, I grew up here on this farm, went off to college, came back, went in partnership with my father. And this picture represents about 1995. In 1992 through 1994, we were one of the farms that were funded under the Salinity Project. And this was a whole farm conversion, okay? So what we did is we took 100% of our ground and we converted from open ditches to underground pipe and gated pipe. And each one of these little segments that you see right here represents where alfalfa valve is, or gated pipe. So I can then treat this as a separate field if I wanted to, a separate field. And each one of these represents sets, I guess, in my farming operation. And you'll notice that some of the drainages, the large open drainages, have now been tiled in and as well and have gone away. Right now, we have a big center pivot right out over the top of this. We have a center pivot over here. We have a center pivot in here. Okay, let's go to the next one. So, we converted to gated pipe, but we were still flood irrigation. We were still furrow irrigation. And the farmer and me basically was very unhappy with the results. I mean, here we are. We've been farming this ground for almost 100 years. And if we were doing the right thing, then how come it doesn't show? And you can look at that through a soil sample. Okay, so you look at your soil samples and they say, well, you got less than 1% organic matter. Okay, so here we're trying to do crop rotations. Here we're trying to raise peat-based crops, which are fibers. We're trying to plow down some green manure. And we're finding out that, gosh, really, we're not building our soils at all. And so there was a couple things there that got me to wondering what it is that could be better. And so that pushed us into the things that we now call soil initiative, minimum tillage, a different way of farming, a better way of farming, what is actually going on in the soil. And the other side is the economic standpoint. I got thinking, well, gee, traditionally we would disc our ground and then we would plow it. And then we would go back and we would have to disc it, and then we would roll it with a roller. And then we would disc it again, and then we would roll it again. And then because we plowed the ground and we moved that soil, well, gosh, now we have to land plane it so that we can build our furrows. So now we've got 8 operations before we plant. So I've got to farm that ground. I've got to farm 8 acres of ground in order to get the production off of 1 acre ground. And that just didn't make very much sense to me. So that's when I started to look at the processes of minimum tillage. So in the process of doing that, that's when we started looking at pivots. And of course, back in the early 2000s, pivots were a bad word. sprinkler irrigation network because they tried it in the early 70s and they were failed. High pressure systems, not very well designed, old technology. And so it almost took an act of Congress basically to get to the point where we could bring these in. And so like I say, these pits were set up as demonstration sites for Montrose County, Montrose and Milton counties to see if they could work, to test, to see if we could make this work. This is this shows here the ag track. This is an armor that we put around our pivots here, our wheels, in order to manage track maintenance. I think they work great. They don't necessarily work great for everybody, but I think they work absolutely well. But we're always open for new ideas, new technology. If I was going to ask Brendan here if he would critique that, my guess is he'd say, well, no wonder we have problems with track management because we have destroyed the soil till where the pivot's running. And your slide yesterday really tweaked my interest. Okay, so the only place that we do any kind of conventional tillage is right where we put those tracks, and we mound those tracks up so that they're the highest point in the field, so the water runs away from them. But eventually, it pounds it down, and because it's the lowest place in the field, that's where the water wants to congregate. Okay, Jerry, go ahead. And that's what it can look like in the middle of the summer out there in the field. You'll notice that this shows the residue management from a previous crop, and I'll get into that crop mix here in a little bit. But we do a winter triticale, of which then comes back in the spring. We pasture that off, and then we plant corn into that, and then come back with Roundup and spray over the top of that, and that leaves us a mulch on the ground. Next slide. We've been very fortunate to have these data loggers available to us. We've rented these over the years. That tells us exactly not only what we're doing out there, but where the water is in the soil. That's an excellent tool. Our minimum tillage started out with this process. Well, this is what we ended up getting into. We didn't start with this by any means, but this is a one-tripper built by Ortho. And there is a shank there that plows the ground about 9 inches deep. This whole process strip tills an area about 5 to 7 inches wide, of which there's a shank that goes down that fractures the soil, puts the fertilizer 4 inches below the seed, and then we come back, it closes that ripper shank mark, and then we, in the first couple of years, we pull this separate of the planter, and then we try and follow the planter track. Of course, we don't have GPS, so I'm not large enough to try that. Okay, next. This shows some of the triticale growing out underneath the pivot. When we put in the large pivot, we had to close up about 1,700 feet of the open drainage. So we scraped all the ground from everywhere around it. We filled those open drainages, and then we brought manure out of the feedlot and stuck out here on the ground to help try and bring back some sort of soil till. This is kind of a collage of that planting operation that I've developed into, where we carry fertilizer on the front of the tractor. We have mated the planter to the back of the one tripper, so it's all a one-pass system at this point. And the only thing it doesn't take so much horsepower, it takes traction. But we've solved that problem because we've got 6 tires on the ground and we're carrying roughly about 400 gallons of liquid fertilizer. So that holds the tractor to the ground, and if the tractor's held to the ground, you can't spin the tires, and it pulls everything through. Actually, it doesn't pull as hard as you can. Now this is an interesting picture because this is where that old drainage was, right down through the center here. One of the previous slides was when we took manure out of the feedlot that we placed on that. And if you'll notice here, this area right through here is relatively a dark green, because that's where we concentrated manure. Now, this is a 2010 picture. We put this pivot in 2006. It was the first production of that. So here we sit over here. You see all of this thin soil? Okay, this is where we had robbed soil in order to put over this drainage. And we've just destroyed a lot of the microbial habitat. We got it over here and we buried it. And we scraped that soil off. We sit over right on the top of Meaker Shale. Most of my farm is in some stage of soil building here. It's all decomposed Meaker Shale. So in this area right here, we'll end up with 120 bushel wheat. And we go across here, and we get into this area right here, and we'll end up with 60 bushel wheat. And then we get back over in here, and we'll have 130, 40 bushel wheat. And then we get up in here, and we have about 80 bushel wheat. And the combine that I have come in and combine these crops has the yield monitor on it. So it's very interesting to sit and watch and figure out where you're at in the field. All that to say, again, is here's my feedlot in conjunction with this pivot, and this pivot. All right, let's see what else we got here. Okay, so I got that thinking, well, gee whiz, there ought to be some better way, some better management of the feedlot and the farming operation. And so we've, over the years, kind of developed this plan here where we plant corn for silage. We don't do grain anymore because the grain leaves all the silver on the ground, which we can pasture out, but then I have to plant something back into that ground in the spring. It's very difficult for us to manage that. Plus, we've adopted this attitude that says the more living plants and living tissue that we can keep in the ground on a year-round basis, the better off it is for that soil. Okay? So we plant corn, we take that for silage. Then right behind that we come in and we plant triticale. And in this case we've developed a triticale and utility radish. And we do that in the, let's see, behind the corn we plant winter wheat. And then the winter wheat goes through, we take the winter wheat off in August. And we try to go right in behind that and plant the triticale and the utility radish. And then last year we said, gee, look at all this growth here. That ought to be valuable for the livestock. So we turned cattle out on it in the fall. We had to rotate through another one. So we have all of this growth here. This is one of the tillage radishes that we've been able to do. Now, tillage radishes are much different than some of these other varieties of radishes. And possibly they do the same thing. Maybe they do a little bit different. But what it tells me, and seeing some of these other mixes and stuff, is that the more diverse, the better we are. So we're just now getting started into the diversity of these cultures and stuff. So we pasture the triticale and radishes in the fall. Then we turn around and those cattle are in the feedlot. And in the springtime, we'll turn around and take those cattle back out of the feedlot and put them back out there in the spring. And that's why I stay, or at least to this point, I have stayed with a triticale base in my cover crop mix. This is because I'm looking for that growth the next spring, early on. We can take a replacement heifer out of the feedlot when it's the most expensive trying to keep her, give her some exercise, let her get out on the pasture. And in the process of doing that, every day that she spends out there, I don't have to haul that feed to the field, or that manure to the field. So this is just an indication of cattle out there on the pastures. This was this fall. This is an area an area to the right of that fence, which is an electric fence there. That's what we'd already captured. We segmented this 9 acre of triticale off into 4 separate quadrants. According to Robbie Valley, who's the extension specialist, you can develop about 400 pounds of dry matter per inch of growth. So we go out there with our tape measure and we measure that, and we say, well, okay, so we've got maybe 7 inches of growth there, okay? And 7 inches of growth and 400 pounds of dry matter per inch is 2,800 pounds of dry matter. And if you took a 1,300 pound cow, and she's going to eat 2.5% of her body weight in dry matter, she's going to eat about 20 pounds of dry matter a day. And so we should be able to get, well, that's about 32 pounds of dry matter. So on an acre, we should get about 86 head days off of that pasture. So that gives you a place to start. All right? Doesn't say that we're going to get 86 days, but it's a place to shoot for. So we've tried to design our system here now so that we can build the soil and also feed the livestock. Now the interesting thing is that it's just something that I've just found within the last, I would say, 2, 3, 4 days. Yesterday was a real gap on this, but in the old days we had sheep. And sheep and cattle that was a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365-day business. And you were always trying to gather feed so that you had something to feed that animal in the wintertime. And we sold out of sheep, we sold out of cattle business, now we're in the feedlot business. And here we are. I find myself asking myself, why are we raising feed to feed cattle in the wintertime when I don't own cattle? Now, your efficiencies of feeding livestock in the winter is basically for every degree of temperature. The mean temperature below 32 degrees, you lose that in efficiency because the animal has to spend more time trying to maintain itself. So if it's 20 degrees, well, they've lost 12% of efficiency right off the bat just because of temperature climate. If it's 10 degrees, well, now you've lost 22% of efficiency. So why am I sitting here with a feedlot trying to feed cattle for other people
to the front desk, please.
when
To the front desk.
I'm battling these environmental issues? And then I began to wonder now, okay, so if I were Miss Braden here, what's the matter with my system? He would probably say, my crops aren't diverse enough. My cover crop isn't diverse enough. Okay? The more of these things that we can get out there, the better we can have. So I'm beginning to ask myself, why am I raising corn? Okay? Why shouldn't I be raising the cover crops and allowing the livestock to graze these cover crops when these crops are actively growing? And because I don't own the livestock, maybe I shouldn't be feeding cattle in there at all. They're not my livestock. I'm providing a service for someone else. And I think I can still provide that service with the idea of this fall management, this spring management. But I think I can build this soil faster if I go in, pursue this diversity. So 7 crop mix and 10 crop mix, I can't hardly wheat. Okay? And then the other part of that question is all right, so I'm going to have this triticale come back this coming spring, so what else can I go in there? So normally I pasture the triticale in the spring from about April 10th through May 1st. We turn these replacement heifers out of the feedlot, they get 20 days of exercise, they're still gaining 1.8 to 2 pounds a day gain out there in that triticale. But I lock them up on May 1st and I plant corn. Well, I'm sitting there saying, well, gee whiz, all I have to do is repeat that triticale. It's already in place. And maybe instead of locking them up on May 1st, maybe I need to go ahead and let them enjoy that pasture all the way through the month of May. And then the month of June, we go in there and we interseed maybe something new into that, one of these crop culture mixes. And then maybe towards the end of the summer, we're back into another pasture program. And what have I done there? I've taken labor out of the equation, I've taken fuel out of the equation, I've taken capitalization out of the equation. The whole point was to raise feed to sell the livestock. Maybe we ought to let the livestock just have the feed. So anybody in the cow business here today, I would encourage you to come and talk to me, because maybe there's something here, because I don't own cattle. I think I'm trying to put together an equation here that might work for either multiple operators, people who own livestock, looking for a cheaper way to manage your livestock. And diversity is that key, because the more you're going to reach out for your own properties, reach out, gather some of this information, there's something that will work for us. Just buying fuel and fertilizer and green tractors, that doesn't do us any good. This is an interesting slide because it shows a couple things. We have been successful in doing what we're doing with this rotation from winter wheat into the triticale tillage radish. Then we go into corn. Well, last year's corn, we had Ron Gould come out and he sampled it and gave me the results back, and I didn't believe it. So I had Jerry come out and sample it, and this shows, I think, 2.6% organic matter in the soil. So what we are doing is working. This also says that this was taken on June 4th. So the only fertilizers that this field had to raise 200 bushel corn is what I put on in that planting operation, which was about 27 gallons of a mixture called PIT 2555, 8% nitrogen, 20% phosphate. So if you do the math on all that, seems like we put on about 37 pounds of nitrogen when we planted. And then when we turned the pivots on, we irrigated, I put on about 10 gallons a acre, 32%. Well, I calculated all that out. I've got less than 100 units of nitrogen on this field. And the nitrogen recommendations here are 0. The phosphate recommendation is 0. The potassium recommendation is 0 to make 200 bushel corn. So that's why I had Jerry come back out and retest it, because I didn't believe the results from the first time. So we didn't put any more fertilizer on it. And we raised as good a crop of corn as we've ever raised. So I think one more. This is to prove that it wasn't a fluke. This one is 2.5% organic matter. On the other pivot, this is 200 bushel. It says here that, well, we need to be making 20 pounds of phosphate. So basically, they're two identical results. The last one is basically shows me sitting there in my feed box, and you've all heard the old saying that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And, so anyway, I can turn this back to you. Questions?
Well, that's me. That's about a mile west of the pea green store. For those of you who don't know where the pea green is, it's about 8 miles southwest of here. And in this particular home place, the ground's pretty good. We can grow onions and sweet corn or whatever we want to grow. I have about 30 acres of hay. But that's not what really makes me tick or makes my motor run. How do we get to that one? Oh, okay. This particular slide, you see the field that you can see the irrigation rows. That's an 8-acre field, and in 1910 it yielded about 1 ton an acre, and then 1910, nice going, Richard. 2010, and in 2012. It's up to about 2.8. You guys didn't even notice that? I do want you to know that my credo in life is that any story worth telling is worth embellishing. And so if it seems like I'm exaggerating things, you can rest assured you're probably right. But anyway, on this field, twice we put about 20 tons of manure, and last year's yield was about 2.5 times as much as it was in 2009. And so I got to be, you know, my idea of soil health, you know, I'm not the smartest frog in the pond, but my idea of soil health that I learned last year is, number one, don't put a plow in the ground. And I don't want to do that anyway because it's too much work. And some of the other things is you want worms and you want roots. And I think, hey, this is for me. If I don't have to plow this ground and just keep working on it to make it better, it fits my old man plan because I don't want to start from scratch on anything. I just kind of want to try to make it better from where it stands. And some of this ground had some grass in it. And you know, this marginal, lovingly called marginal ground, somebody said, well, why don't we just plow that out or kill it all off and start over again? And I think, man, I don't want to put a plow on the ground and this little bit of grass that's coming up, you know, ruin it. Let me see if I can just kind of make it better. And so what we did, we tried this idea of manure. And like I said, over a 4-year period, we 2.5 times the yield of tonnages of hay off of that field. And what I do, besides just the manure, I've spent quite a bit of time lately in the winter, November and December, just going out with a broadcast seeder and putting down tall thorn vestry. Now the beauty of tall thorn vestry is that you can afford it. There are grasses that you can put out there that our experiments have shown, and I'll talk about that in a second, that would do well, but they may cost like, you know, $10.50 a pound for new hide. Well, this tall thorn vestry, when I bought most of it, it was $1 a pound, and it kind of liked this ground. It would tolerate the marginal alkali conditions of this ground. Right there. Same field, you can go again. Okay, this is a kind of an experiment that we did in 2005 in conjunction with the, no, I'm lying. Let me step back. We did this about 4 years ago. We did it on one field, and we did kill it all off. The only way to get rid of the foxtail was to you can't get rid of the foxtail without the other grasses, and it broke my heart to see other grasses die. But we did spread it and start from scratch. And this was the mixture that we put in it. And if you go out there today, you can find some of all of that. But 95% of it is the vestry, which kind of made me believe is, hey, this is kind of nice. We looked out here, we found something that will grow in this ground, and it doesn't cost a fortune to do it. And so if I see bad spots, all I do is I throw on the broadcast seeder, and I go out there and spread this tall thorn foxtail around in November. Hopefully the cows stomp on it and the snow falls on it, and it's seems to be working. Okay, this was supposed to be number 2. It didn't work out, but I wanted to show you. You see these 2 old guys? This is a picture I gleaned down at the NRA this building. It says, I put all my profits back into the ranch. And what I want to do, go to the next slide and see me standing in the field, and at least I know we'll look a little better than those guys. You know, let's make it some kind of forward progress. Now, I was sitting in the back before, and I realized, man, there's all those numbers up there, and they might mean something, but I couldn't even read the darn things. And I have these things. The main thing I wanted to tell you about here is before the manure, we had organic matter at 1%. After manure, we have organic matter at 4.6. And all we did was put manure out there. And of course, I told you how great it did on the yield of this crop. So, nothing too fancy. Just a guy kind of bluffing his way through life, trying to make what I call marginal pasture hay ground better. And just the manure has accomplished that for us. Okay. This is the CSU Extension Pasture Grass Project, which we did just across the road in what I lovingly call the bowl, and mainly because everything kind of irrigates down and we can collect good water in a pond. But in 2005, we did an experiment, and in that experiment, we had these 9 grasses. So what we decided to do, what grasses or legumes will tolerate the kind of soil conditions we have here, which is highly alkaline conditions. And so we planted, and I had, you know, the hot shots from the CSU and the Wayne Cooley in Rockville Valley, and Dr. Joe had this fancy Truex interseeder. And we got pretty scientific, and we spread it all out and double seeded it. And I set up a little sprinkler system where I pumped out of this retention pond. And we grew these grasses. And then we tried to keep track of which ones did the best. Good. Okay. On the right side of that picture, down where the snow is, that's where we did the project. Where the trees are is where the pond was. And they did the electrical conductivity test on all that ground. And where it was a little lower, it was amazing how much better the grasses did when it was like 6.2. And where it was like 9, the grasses would come up, but not so good. And my idea was, if we plant all of these, let's find out where we get the best bang for our buck if we want to try to grow things in this kind of ground. Well, you can see there on the bottom right, there's nothing grows there, and it's not even irrigatable. But all that other ground where stuff is growing now, it's basically the fescue grass. And this winter, you can see some bad spots in the field. Well, I ran over that with the cedar and put some more down, and there's some snow still sitting on it. And hopefully in the spring, I'll get a little better coverage. And I've been working on some of that ground for years, but it does get better. Manure has been a big help. If I had to encourage people to do anything, what I'd encourage you to do is to get soil samples. Like the organic matter in that one field, I said went from 1 to 4.6. Oh, 4.6, that's pretty normal. Maybe I got something here. Another thing, go ahead. You going to say something? Oh. Another thing, on what I fondly call South Place, the ground is pretty good, and I have grass alfalfa fields. And you know, one year, when I first started doing this, my son used to farm it, and then I said, I'm too old, I don't want to plow this all the time, so I started putting in grass mixtures, and with a little little alfalfa in it. And first year I was cutting it 3 times. 3, 4 years later, I was cutting it twice, and then 1 year there's one field I only cut it once. What's the deal here? You know, I'm irrigating the same, I'm fertilizing it the same, what's going on? And so I thought, oh, let's do a soil sample. That's when I first got into that idea. And we did, and we found out that those grasses needed phosphorus. And so we started feeding it phosphorus again. And lo and behold, this year I cut it 3 times again. But in order for the nitrogen to do its job, it's got to have the right level of phosphorus in it. And so without the soil test, which I do a couple times a year now, I wouldn't have known that. But it amazes me that from the old days when the grasses we gave nitrogen and the alfalfas we gave phosphorus, now we give the alfalfa a little nitrogen shot, and we give the grass a phosphorus shot in order to keep it going. And the yields get better all the time. Okay. Well, that's what some of the hay look like. We put it up in 3x3 bales. I don't have that kind of hay equipment. I looked at, so I have that custom, the 3x3s. But in some of these presentations, I've looked at some of the slides. Some of these farmers own a tractor. The one tractor or piece of equipment is worth more than all of my equipment put together. What I call my new tractor, I bought in 1980. Everything else I bought on farm sales, and it's even older than that. But I try to keep it functional. And I put up a lot of small bales, but mostly what I've been selling, we put up in those 3x3s now. Now, I'm done now, right? That's the last slide. I saw a couple people leaving for the door for lunch already.
Yeah, we're getting close on it. Any questions?